What's going on, beautiful people? It's your man Louie T here on the Louie T Network podcast, late night Louie edition. Free agency is kicking into high gear. The Buffalo Bills got busy today in terms of freeing up that cap space, and we've seen teams kind of getting themselves in a position to get under the cap and get into a healthier cap position as free agency nears so that they can start to improve their roster, set themselves up for the draft, et cetera, et cetera. So I talk about this all the time. Deadlines spur action. You're seeing actions take place as we are now officially a week out from the start of free agency in the new league year getting underway. So somebody asked me a question last night that prompted me to want to address it in a more detailed way today. Thought it was a really good question. The easy, simple answer I gave them last night, and I still think that answer is going to hold serve, but I do want to discuss it. This is one of the better free agency classes we've seen in quite some time, specifically at the running back position, but just overall in general. Teams are having to let go of quality football players to get under the cap. And as I've said before, it's wide open. Even though the Chiefs have won the last two Super Bowls and they're going to try to do something no other team has done, which is three-peat in the NFL, it's still wide open. The Chiefs didn't have to win the Super Bowl last year and easily could have not won it. The 49ers probably could have and should have won that game in the Super Bowl, but they did not take advantage of some opportunities specifically early in that ball game, but that's nor here nor there. Free agency is starting to rev up that engine, and it looks like it's going to be in full effect this year, but still some time before the start of free agency. Teams can still reach long-term deals with some of their prospective free agents. So we'll see what happens over the next few days, but shit's getting really interesting. We're going to discuss that and then some tonight here on the Louie T Network podcast that starts now. The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Who else could it be? Me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to the 402nd installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Real quick before we jump into today's show, if Miss Perry's out there, I saw your message. I checked out some of the country music from the playlist that you sent me. No go. That's a no go for me. Now, I will say there was one artist in particular. It seemed like he tried to infuse like country and trap and little different bits and pieces of other genres and tried to countryfy it. It was a nice attempt, but I'm going to pass on that. Something about their voice, it seems like every person that does country music has to have their voice sound the same way so that you identify it as country music. And I think it's that sound that is very off-putting to my ears. It's like, you gotta do it, and I just can't do it. That they all sound like that to me. Like that's a requirement of being a country singer. So we know that it's a country song. I can't do it. Speaking of which, we got Jack Reacher season 2 off and running. We knocked down, I think, the first 3 episodes. Tasty. We are really excited about what we've gotten ourselves into. looking forward to finishing that up over the weekend, more likely than not. And we will be in position for season 3, if there is, in fact, a season 3. I don't know about you guys, but it seems like a lot of quality shows are getting canceled these days. And I can't quite put my finger on why that is, but maybe it's just the shows that I like that are getting canceled. But whatever the case may be. Free agency is right around the corner, literally a week away. And every day it seems like we're seeing another team start to cut quality football players in the pursuit of cap health. And some team's trash is another team's treasure. And so there are going to be some quality football players available. Now, generally speaking, if a player is cut or not re-signed, there's usually a reason behind that. Now, again, is it enough of a deterrent to stop another team from pursuing? No, it's not in most instances, but all it takes is one, right? Let's dive into free agency and what is starting to happen with free agency and how it's starting to take shape. And then we can start to predict what we think is going to happen in certain scenarios. The Bills got busy today. The Jaguars were busy yesterday. Seahawks were busy yesterday, et cetera, et cetera. We see how this is going. There are still other teams that have moves to make to get themselves under the cap. Other players will be cut loose. More deals will be restructured, et cetera, et cetera. So let's talk about what has been done, what the landscape looks like, and where some of these players may ultimately find themselves landing. And I think the way I'm going to do that today is via a gem dropping session. What do you think? Yeah. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind. Let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T88. Let me open you up. Get you thinking a little bit. So let's start with the Bills today, and then I'll get to the real meat and potatoes of what I wanted to discuss here. So the Bills let go of 5 players today. The 3 needle movers were Mitch Morse. That's a center for those of you keeping score at home. He is 31 years old, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Jordan Poyer, safety, who along with fellow free agent safety in Buffalo, what was the other safety's name? It was Poyer, and it was I drew a blank on his name. But they signed them right around the same time, and they've made one hell of a tandem in Buffalo for quite some time. Micah Hyde. Thank you, Dr. B. Micah Hyde. And so they finally moved on from Jordan Poyer. He's 32 years old. And then, of course, Tre'Davious White was probably the most notable of the releases today from the Bills. He's 29. He just turned 29 in January. However, the problem with him has been the injuries. He's torn his ACL not once, but twice in the last 3 seasons. And so there is a cause for concern as to what you would be getting should you take a flyer out on Tre'Davious White. And really, with his situation and him coming off of another ACL tear, I don't think he's in any position to call any shots at this point. He just wants an opportunity. And whomever signs him, because somebody's going to give him an opportunity once he proves he's healthy, he's probably going to have to take an incentive-laden deal, right? So those were the 3 big names, but there were a couple of others that that were also released by Buffalo. Von Miller restructured his deal, took less guaranteed money, lowered his cap hit, obviously, lowered his base salary, and now he's got a chance to make the money back, over $20 million in incentives, but he's going to have to play better than he did last season. And there were times last year where you didn't even know Von Miller was on the field. So obviously when you have the injury that he sustained, you're not yourself that following year. And so the hope is he can get back to the Von Miller that has been one of the most disruptive pass rushers in the league for the better part of a decade when healthy. So this is his last gasp right here. This is his last ditch effort at proving that he can still get it done at a high level. And I think Buffalo understood that Von Miller wasn't going to get this money. And I think Von Miller understood he wasn't going to get this type of money anywhere else, which is why he allowed this thing to go down the way that it did, because he's taking less money guaranteed. And if he thought he could get the same money that he was getting from Buffalo out on the market, he would have just said, no, I'm not taking a pay cut. I'm not restructuring. And then they would have said, okay, well, we're going to cut you. And I'm pretty sure that's what was communicated to his agent. Hey, look, man, we need this cap space. So either Von's going to come sit down at the table with us and we're going to have to work out some numbers that make sense for both of us, or we're going to have to cut him. We're going to have to do what we got to do. And he went ahead and restructured. So Bills got busy today, freed up almost $30 million worth of cap space. And they did sign Mitchell Trubisky, who was cut from the Steelers about 3 weeks ago or so. So they did go back and recycle Mitchell Trubisky. He was in Buffalo before he went to Pittsburgh. So they are getting a guy that they know they can trust, who they feel really comfortable with in that quarterback room, has been a really good teammate in Buffalo. And so Mitchell Trubisky returns to Buffalo. So the real topic, though, of discussion for me is the running back position in particular. We have never seen a running back free agency crop quite like the one that is upon us this year. All of those guys that got franchise tagged a season ago, no longer under the tag, all still relatively young. Barkley, Pollard, Jacobs, all still in the prime of their careers. So it's not like you're getting a guy past his prime, like a Derrick Henry, for instance. You're getting guys going into the prime of their careers. So those are going to be some very enticing free agents at the running back position. Then you have the guys that are probably past their prime, but still very productive players in the league, i.e. Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler, Joe Mixon, if he should be released by the Cincinnati Bengals, which I think it is coming. And then you've got guys that are also going into their prime, but are less high profile, like a DeAndre Swift and an Alexander Madison. So the running back position is absolutely loaded. And you could even throw in there Devin Singletary, who had a really good year last year for the Houston Texans. He'll be a free agent as well. So it's a loaded running back class, free agents, the likes of which we've never seen before. So the question now becomes, where do these guys land? Somebody asked me this yesterday. Where do you think all the running backs land in free agency? Great question. Because, and I essentially answered it yesterday by saying it's a game of musical chairs. All these teams are doing is reshuffling the deck. So Dallas is moving on from Tony Pollard. So guess what? Dallas needs a running back. So they'll probably reach into this running back crop of free agents and grab one. Philadelphia is moving on from DeAndre Swift. Guess what? They'll probably reach in here and grab themselves a running back out of this mix. Houston may be allowing Devin Singletary to walk. Guess what? That means they'll need a running back, probably going to reach in here and grab one, right? Giants are allowing Saquon Barkley to walk, which means they probably need to reach in here and grab one, right? Raiders letting Josh Jacobs walk, which means they probably need to reach in here and grab one. You get where I'm going with this, right? So it feels like it's just going to be a reshuffling of the deck. You go here, you go here, you go there, you go there. But there are other names, there are other teams like Chicago, for instance, who could use an upgrade at the running back position, who may be involved in all of this. A team like Minnesota, who moved on from Alexander Madison and moved on from Dalvin Cook last year, may be in the mix. The Green Bay Packers are moving on from A.J. Dillon, right? He's in the mix too as a free agent, and another name to add to the list. They could be interested in adding someone to go along with Aaron Jones if he himself is back, which I don't see him going anywhere, but there may have to be a renegotiation there with his deal to free up some cap space potentially. We'll see what happens with Aaron Jones. But all in all, there are other teams that are going to get involved, and there's a lot of running backs. Baltimore, moving on from their Ohio State running back that can't seem to stay healthy to save his life. I can't remember his name, but they're moving on from him more likely than not. So they could be interested in one of these running backs. So let's start trying to knock them down one by one and talk about J.K. Dobbins. Thank you, Sarah Small. J.K. Dobbins. So let's start knocking some of these down. We'll start with Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley, the odds-on favorite right now is Houston. That sounds like a good destination for me. They could use a home run threat out of the backfield, and with what C.J. Stroud did a season ago and the weapons that they've surrounded him with at both the tight end and receiver position, we watched their receivers really step up last year. Guys that were unsung heroes like Noah from the Cowboys, who stepped in and played really well, had some massive games. The receiver from Michigan had a career year. I mean, he went off. And then they had a rookie receiver out of Houston, Tank Dell, who was playing extremely well until he got injured. But they've done some good things. Obviously, they added Dalton Schultz last year in free agency on a one-year deal. He was outstanding. They ended up re-signing him. We talked about that on a different show. 3 years, $36 million. So he'll be back in the fold in Houston. And they could still add yet another receiver. So what they really need, though, is a running back. Someone to complement, the receivers, the quarterback, take some off of C.J. Stroud's plate. Not that Devin Singletary didn't do a good job last year, but you can do better than that, right? So Saquon makes a ton of sense for the Houston Texans. And I think of all of the running backs that are available, to me, he makes the most sense from an explosive standpoint. So I think he's the guy that's going to ultimately end up in Houston. We'll see, though. Obviously, there are other teams who are interested, and money talks and everything else walks. But I think the Texans are in a position to land a guy like like Saquon Barkley. So let's talk about the next guy up, which is Josh Jacobs. And he's really interesting to me because I don't really know how I feel about Josh Jacobs. 2 years ago, he was the NFL leading rusher. Last year, he dealt with nagging injuries. He wasn't the same guy. And we've seen more of that from him, where he's dealt with nagging injuries, wasn't the same guy, than we have the leading NFL rusher type of player. We know he's capable of that. We know it's in there. And thus, I think there's going to be a team out there that, takes a flyer on him. And I won't even call it a flyer, because a flyer would suggest that, if it works out, cool. If it doesn't, we're not tripping. Somebody's going to sign this guy because they know he's capable. He's very talented. I'm looking at a team like Minnesota maybe even Chicago as a potential landing destination for him. Minnesota's got their own set of problems to deal with. They got to figure out what's going to happen at the quarterback position with Kirk Cousins. They desperately need him back, and he's testing free agency. And that's another position that we can really dive into, because generally speaking, you don't have a ton of, talented quarterbacks available in free agency. This year, you do have a few signal callers that could change the fortunes of a few teams out there. Now, what's left in the tank for Russell Wilson? Don't know. Is Baker Mayfield really going to leave Tampa Bay? Doesn't feel like it. But those guys are free agents should deals not get done, prior to the start of the new league year. And obviously Russell Wilson has already been essentially given his walking papers essentially in Denver. And he's been given the ability to go, talk to other teams, even though technically speaking, he has not been released yet. He's been given permission to start pursuing other squads. So there's quite a bit of quarterbacks available. And then there's still a few more that may be available via trade. Justin Fields, Mac Jones, et cetera, et cetera. So interesting crop there. But as we continue with the running backs, Josh Jacobs, I think, is going to end up in the NFC North somewhere. Minnesota or Chicago. I'll guess Chicago, but I wouldn't rule out Minnesota either after they moved on from Alexander Madison. Jacobs kind of fits that offense, and I think he'd be a good fit in Minnesota should they decide to go that route. Then you get to Tony Pollard, and he's extremely interesting because I feel like last year in Dallas, and there were a number of circumstances. Cowboys had, a game of musical chairs on their offensive line. They were constantly shifting guys around, and it wasn't the best situation for Tony Pollard last season, but he didn't show that same, burst and big play ability that we had seen the first 2 years, or 3 years rather, of his career, or the past 3 years, I should say, prior to last season. And it makes me wonder if he needs to be a part of a stable, or at least a duo, a tandem. Now, they had Rico Dowdle in Dallas running the rock, and he was solid. But what I'm essentially getting at is Tony Pollard a true number one running back? Or is he like a 1B or 1A option, but not truly the guy? Interesting conversation there, but nonetheless, he's going to be a guy that is going to command some attention. And I wouldn't be shocked if he landed right back in the NFC East. The Giants will need a running back. The Eagles will need a running back. I wouldn't be shocked if he ended up right back in the division. Don't discount a team like the Bears, as I just mentioned. The Cincinnati Bengals make a ton of sense for him if he decided to go that direction. And he would be sort of a really good replacement for Joe Mixon, if that makes sense. So if they move on from Joe Mixon, which I assume they will, don't forget that Cincinnati drafted, a running back last year, Brown, out of Illinois. So they may not choose to do anything at the running back position, even if there's no Joe Mixon. They may decide to go young and draft another running back, 2 years in a row, draft a running back or so. But we'll see what they decide to do, right? I think Tony Pollard ends up in the NFC East, either with the Giants or with the Eagles. A lot of times with backs in particular, or players in particular, it's always easier for them to end up back in the division because those teams have seen more of you than anybody else has, and they know what you're capable of. So we'll see what happens there. Derrick Henry is fascinating for me. he's definitely going to want to go somewhere where he can contend and win something. And a lot of people have him going to Baltimore. And the Ravens did try to trade for him. And they came this close to getting a deal done, and then the Titans pulled out at the last second. So all signs point to Baltimore right now. But my question with that is, and that would be a good place for him because they are knocking on the door, right? They are literally on the doorstep of winning a Super Bowl. You know, they were in the AFC Championship last season. So that it would make a ton of sense for Derrick Henry. But if you're the Ravens, and I don't know what Gus Edwards' situation is, and I know Gus Edwards isn't Derrick Henry. I'm well aware, but they're similar backs, right? Like, you don't need a duplicate there. Now, if you're telling me that there's no more Gus Edwards and you're going to get back Keaton Mitchell, and, you know, he sustained a pretty significant injury towards the end of the season. So I don't know when he will be available again and if he'll be the same Keaton Mitchell that was this lightning rod that really sparked them towards the end, the mid portion to the end of the season before his injury. I don't know if he'll return to that form immediately. It may take him a little while to get back to being that guy again. But that would be a hell of a 1-2 punch. Derrick Henry's physical nature, his ability and again, keep in mind, with Lamar Jackson back there, Derrick Henry would have never seen holes this big before in a defense. You know, he's used to seeing loaded boxes. He's used to running against 8-man fronts. And he's not used to seeing these massive cutback lanes and massive openings because of the threat of Lamar Jackson pulling the football, right? So this could be a resurgence of sorts for him if he were to land in Baltimore. You go anywhere else and you're going to continue to see the type of boxes that you saw in Tennessee, not to the extent because other teams, i.e., let's say Dallas or Philadelphia, you know, or teams that are definitely in the mix for his services, those teams have enough talent to where you can't load up the box or they could take a shot one-on-one down the field and hurt you. The Titans were never really in that position. So you could just load up to stop Derrick Henry and dare the quarterback to find someone to throw the football to down the field. That won't be the case in any of the destinations I just talked about. But you add in the element of Lamar Jackson, and Derrick Henry will be in a position that he's never been in his career. Now, something else that would be a little bit foreign to him is Derrick Henry is used to being in an offense where the quarterback gets under center and he's handed off the football. He's able to, you know, stand 5 to 7 yards behind the quarterback, you know, get that running back track, et cetera, get a runway to start with. The Ravens are more gun-based. That's how they do a lot of damage. Now, not saying that they can't get under center. They're fully capable of doing that. But would they have to change up a little bit of their offensive scheme? I don't know. Baltimore does seem like the most logical destination. He's a veteran. That's a veteran team. They are ready to win. He wants to win. And he could be one of the missing pieces that they need. Seems like a logical fit. And they tried to trade for him. So all of that is working in his favor to end up in Baltimore. But I wouldn't discount Dallas as another destination. Houston has seen him up close and personal, but I would like to think that they would want to go with a much younger back with the Houston Texans, which is why Saquon makes a ton of sense for them. But we'll see. How about Austin Eckler? He's an interesting one because He wanted out of Los Angeles last year. He wanted to trade. They gave him permission to seek a trade. No one was willing to give up anything to get him because you were going to have to not only trade for him, give up draft capital, you were going to also have to sign him to a deal he was looking to get paid. So no one came to his rescue last year. Now he's a free agent and a year older. The production wasn't as great last year. He dealt with some nagging injuries, et cetera, et cetera. He's pushing 30. I think he's right around 29 right now, 28, 29, somewhere in that neighborhood. So what is a good fit for Austin Eckler? Oh, man, that's a really good one. You think about all the teams that I've just mentioned who are moving on from backs, and you think about some other teams that could be in the mix looking for a running back. That's an interesting dilemma. Where could Austin Eckler? Because I think Eckler has established himself as one of the premier pass catching backs in the NFL. So you would like to think that he could go somewhere where throwing the ball is objective one and getting it to a back out in space is something that they don't mind doing. He would be, again, the perfect fit in a place like Denver. But like I said, the Denver Broncos have already, littered their backfield with a bunch of different backs, whether via the draft or Samaje Perine in free agency last year. So I don't really know if that's a place he could actually go. The Vegas Raiders, if he were to stay in that division, sticking with that theme I just talked about, Denver, the Vegas Raiders would make a ton of sense. You know who would make a ton of sense if they moved on from Jerick McKinnon? Would be the Kansas City Chiefs. Would make a world of sense for a guy like Austin Eckler because they love throwing the ball to the back out of the backfield. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, is done. I think his contract is up. They did not pick up the fifth-year option on him. So I think his contract has expired this offseason. Jerick McKinnon, I think they brought him back last year on a one-year deal after bringing him back on a one-year deal the year prior. So I think he is set to test free agency, and it might be the end of the road for him. We'll see if any other team other than Kansas City is interested in him, as he's up there in age now as Jerick McKinnon. So I could see them deciding to pair up Isaiah Pacheco with a guy like Austin Eckler. It makes a ton of sense. I wouldn't discount the Kansas City Chiefs in that regard. That would be a really interesting landing spot for him. How about Alexander Madison, who was released by the Minnesota Vikings? I could see him going somewhere like the Giants, right? I don't see the Giants spending a whole heck of a lot on a running back. He could stay in the division, go to Green Bay. Wouldn't cost them a lot to replace A.J. Dillon with the back there. The Titans make some sense there. You move on from Derrick Henry. You replace him with Alexander Madison to pair him with Tajay Sharp, and that could be your backfield in Tennessee. That's just a few teams to throw out there that might be interesting. If you're the Cleveland Browns, that could be a good backup to Nick Chubb, right? Who's coming off of a major injury. I don't think Kareem Hunt's going to be back there. They got a bunch of backs, though. They also have Ford, who was playing really well, and then he got injured too. But just a few teams to throw out there. Boy, it's a lot of backs, man. DeAndre Swift, let's go there because he's very interesting. I could see him landing in a multitude of places. Again, sticking in the division, I could see him landing in Dallas. I could see him potentially being a target of the Commanders, potentially, even though I think that's very unlikely, but I wouldn't put it past them to be interested in him. The Giants are probably interested in him. Again, in the division, they got to see him twice a year, and they had to be impressed. He makes a ton of sense for like a team like Vegas, who's moving on from Josh Jacobs. I would imagine that wherever he goes, he would like to have an opportunity to be the lead back. So a place like Vegas would make a ton of sense. They don't really have anybody threatening him out there. They got Zamir White, but he's not a guy that you're really too concerned about. He may get some carries, but if DeAndre Swift were to go to Vegas, he'd be the lead dog there. Minnesota, as we mentioned already, would be an interesting destination for him potentially there. So those are a couple of places that I could see him. You know what would be a great fit, and I just brought him up. You know, Kansas City would be a tremendous, and he kicked their ass this past year, and I'm pretty sure they're aware of what he's capable of, and he's really young, and it's not going to cost you a lot. Like Swift, to me, I would put him as the best value in free agency this year. If he's healthy, he can do just as much as Tony Pollard or Josh Jacobs or any of these other backs can do. He's capable of doing those things. He can catch it out of the backfield. He's so dynamic. You put him on the right team. Again, I feel like a coach like Sean Payton would really maximize his abilities. You put him in the right system. He's really fascinating, you know? I don't know, man. There's a lot of places where he would fit and would be dangerous. Kansas City probably being at the top of that list. Sean Payton getting his hands on him in Denver would be dangerous. But I think more likely he would end up somewhere like Vegas, the Giants, maybe. Dallas is in play. Those teams make a ton of sense. Cincinnati, don't rule the Bengals out if they move on from Mixon. Again, he is a very good fit and very comparable to Joe Mixon in the skill set that he had if they were to move on from Mixon this year. So there's a bunch of places. I'd put Kansas City at the top of the list. Cincinnati would probably be a very close second if they were interested, because these are title contending teams who aren't afraid to use the back out of the backfield, who do hand the ball off, you know, in the case of Cincinnati particularly. And this guy can catch it and he can be dynamic. He's, to me, the wild card of this entire group of running backs. If you can find a good home for him, he could be very dangerous. I actually thought he was underutilized in Philadelphia. I really didn't understand why he didn't touch it more. When they were at their best and their most successful offensively, he was a huge part of the offense. And it just didn't make sense to me that he didn't touch it more. But that's nor here nor there. The bottom line is he'll be a really intriguing and fascinating free agent running back. You know what other position is going to be really interesting too? Corner. Because a lot of veteran corners and safeties now, mind you, they're not cutting bait with guys that are 25 and 26 years old. A lot of these dudes are 28, 29, 30, right? Like Darius Williams is a guy I liked 3 years ago before he went to Jacksonville and spent the last 3 years or so there. I liked him when he was coming out of, LA with the Rams and playing ball and was still, 27 years old. Now he's 30 and they just cut him. Obviously, Tre'Davious White getting cut today. He's 29 years old, just turned 29 in January, coming off of another knee surgery. So he's not really all that appetizing right now. But when he's healthy, and he'll be healthy at some point, somebody's going to give him an opportunity. Someone's going to kick those tires. Stephon Gilmore is going to be a free agent. Yeah, he's old, probably 33 years old or something like that. Yeah, he's old, but he played well for Dallas last year. All it takes is one team to say we could use, like the Steelers love veteran corners. They love themselves a crunchy, old, dusty corner. They had Patrick Peterson last year. They had Joe Hayden at the end of his career when he was past his prime. If there's one thing the Steelers love is an old, dusty, crusty corner. Stephon Gilmore still has something left in the tank. So we'll see. Avonte Maddox was cut by the Philadelphia Eagles today. I don't know if you saw that. And he's one of those guys, still young, still a lot of talent. Now, he dealt with a major injury last year as well, so that's something to keep in mind. But his wasn't, I don't think, to his lower extremities. I think his was an upper body injury. So you feel a little bit better about that. And Avonte Maddox is a really good nickel. When he's healthy, he can provide you with some quality nickel play. And there's always a place in the league for a guy that can play inside. So he'll be interesting. He'll be one to watch as teams start to dig into the free agency crop of corners. Xavier Howard got released by the Miami Dolphins. So he's probably the biggest name available. Now, again, he's had a myriad of injuries. He's 30 years old. So, again, none of these guys are like in their prime for the most part, but they can still help a football team. So that's going to be an interesting position when it's all said and done, because a lot of teams are choosing, because the safeties and particularly the corners are the ones that had these robust cap numbers, and they could save money by cutting these corners and these safeties, and you're seeing teams do that. And so it's going to make that market that much more interesting as it continues to take shape and develop. Safety position is in that mix. Both Seahawks safeties were cut yesterday, Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs. I talked about Rayshon Jenkins getting cut from the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's a younger safety, not super young, young enough. And so you're seeing safeties getting cut. I talked about Jordan Poyer getting cut from Buffalo today. And so you're seeing teams get rid of these secondary players. We'll see if they find homes and if they can help a team maybe push somebody over the top. It's going to make for an interesting couple of positions. I think overall, it's a solid free agency class from the standpoint of availability and having some quality players that will move the needle. I don't think it is particularly deep at every position, which you usually don't get. But when you got a free agency that gives you two guys in particular that can start for you, three if you factor in Russell Wilson, but I think a lot of people are looking at him as damaged goods at this point. But you got three quarterbacks that could be needle movers, two in particular that are coming up. Well, Baker's coming off of one of his best seasons of his career. Kirk Cousins is still capable, right? He's coming off a major injury, though, so that's something to keep in mind. But he's very capable. Then you've got Christian Wilkins, who's a premier defensive tackle in the prime of his career. Then you got Chris Jones, who, while he's in his 30s, he could command upwards of $30+ million on the free agent market, which is crazy to think. But what he's been able to do when healthy for the last 4 or 5 years speaks volumes. And a team that's chasing Kansas City probably will be the type of team that might be willing to ante up to get him, right? So this free agency period is actually going to be one to keep an eye on. The one position that I think is lacking any oomph is receiver, because so many teams are unwilling to allow their guys to walk, which is what you're supposed to do, lock your guys up or at least slap the franchise tag on them. Colts did that with Michael Pittman Jr. The Bucks were wise enough to bring back Mike Evans on a 2-year deal. The Bengals locked up T. Higgins with the franchise tag. And so a lot of that luster, that shine was taken off of the wide receiver position with teams doing what they knew was going to be the smart thing to do. But so you got guys like Tyler Boyd, who's past his prime, and Calvin Ridley, who was very disappointing this year with Jacksonville, available in free agency. And those are probably going to be some of the bigger names. Not really interested, right? So we'll see. The tackle crop isn't all that strong either. That's another one that kind of stinks a bit. Interior-wise, there's a lot of stuff available on the offensive line. But and then edge rusher Danielle Hunter is available. So this is actually when you think about it, there's some really big names available, guys that are going to get paid and get paid some big money when it's all said and done. But I'm fascinated to see the game of musical chairs at the running back position in particular, because when it's all said and done, I ultimately think that with the quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins is going to end up back in Minnesota, even though I'm hearing that, Atlanta is making a ton of sense there. And if I'm Atlanta, I'm still waiting on Justin Fields. That's the move for me. I'm willing to give up a second round pick. And did you guys see the rumor? And I, again, believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man, Louie T, right? But I saw a rumor, and I don't believe it, because that rumor came out, and then I would say within 24 hours, we saw a report that the Steelers aren't interested in any of the free agent quarterbacks, Cousins, Russell Wilson, or Baker Mayfield. They're not interested in any of them. But one of the initial rumor was the Steelers were prepared to offer the Bears a second round pick for Justin Fields, but they rescinded the offer when they felt like they were bidding against themselves. I don't believe it, but the Bears have already said they want to see free agency play itself out. They want somebody to be desperate. I don't think a second round pick was ever on the table. They would have taken that in a heartbeat. I think that right now, the best that they've been able to get anybody to commit to or even be interested without hanging up on them has probably been a third or fourth round pick for Justin Fields. And I think they want a second. They're not getting a first. I just don't see any scenario in which they get their first round pick back. But they could get their second round pick back, which they traded in the deal to get Montez Sweat. They could get that back. And I think that's what they ultimately want, is a second rounder. And they feel like if we wait out the process, if we wait to see what teams end up without a seat in this game of quarterback musical chairs, somebody will come to us. Somebody will sit down and say, hey, what you trying to get for Justin again? What's the asking price? But they know they got to wait this thing out. If Baker, the best thing that could happen to the Bears is that all the quarterbacks go back to the teams that they were with last year. So Cousins goes back to Minnesota, Baker goes back to Tampa, and then Russ lands wherever he's going to land, right? He's really insignificant in all of this. He's not going to Atlanta more likely than not. I think Vegas is probably the most likely destination for him, but we'll see where, some other opportunities may arise. I thought it was idiotic that Panthers head coach Dave Canales had to pretty much brush off any notion that Russell Wilson was in play in Carolina. And I'm like, why would he even need to say that? That's crazy to me. But he did. If those scenarios play themselves out, that'll give the Bears the leverage that they need, because all of the teams that don't have a quarterback, who need a quarterback, will still need a quarterback. And that'll put you in a position where, hey, look, everybody's not getting one. I got this young stud here. What you trying to do? So this free agency period is going to be nuts. And we're still not there yet, obviously, because we still have some more time to go. And you're going to see some more players getting cut. You're going to see some more guys getting cut. And I talked about the cornerback position and how many players are available. Add Kendall Fuller to the list. I don't, funny as Washington fans, I don't think we really realize how valued Kendall Fuller is around the league. But if you look at most free agency lists, Kendall Fuller is in the top 20. And depending on what list you're looking at, he's in the top 15 of potential free agents. And now that we've gotten past the franchise tag deadline, a lot of the guys that were pushing him back have been tagged or signed, like Mike Evans, Jalen Johnson, T. Higgins, et cetera, right? Josh Allen, Brian Burns, all of those guys have been tagged or signed. So on most of those lists, if they've recalibrated those lists after all of the moves that have been made, Kendall Fuller is probably top 10 on a lot of lists. I talked about this on a show yesterday. 9 of the top 13 free agents that were supposed to be available at the start of the new league year are now off the table because of either the franchise tag, a transitional tag, or they've been re-signed by the team that they were with a season ago. So if you remove 9 guys, and let's say Kendall Fuller was 18th on the list, he's now 9th on the list. So I don't think people realize how valuable of an asset right now Kendall Fuller appears to be going into free agency. And this, I'm telling you, it's going to be an interesting crop of corners out there. And he fits in that group of these guys that are pushing 30 years old, but still have some quality football left in them. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting. Free agency is going to be a lot of fun. I will say that. I can't wait to see what else transpires prior to free agency as more teams have to cut bait to get to a comfortable place under the cap. There may be 1 or 2 more surprise cuts that we weren't, looking for that may free up a player or two. Jerome Baker was cut by the Dolphins. That's a quality starting linebacker, folks, that they had to part ways with because they got to get their cap situation squared away, So they also had to cut Emmanuel Ogbah. That's another edge rusher for a team that may be looking for edge rushing help. He's no dynamo, but he's a body and he's a guy that can get after the quarterback, right? So you're going to see, a number of these types of moves happening for teams that have been spending somewhat frivolously, and now, their cap situation has come to roost, and they gotta figure it out, and they gotta figure out a way to get it situated. So anyway, I digress. Let's get to your comments. Y'all know how we do it here on the Louie T Network podcast. If you're out there, you want your comment read, super chats are the best way to do so. That'll allow you to jump straight to the front of the line. However, if you use the hashtag LouieTLive and your comment is pertinent, we'll read that and address it on the air, and we'll discuss it. And so line those up, use the hashtag LouieTLive. And if time permits, we'll get to as many of those comments as we can. But of course, super chats come first. So let's get to the comment section and start with King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, how many edge players do you think that should be signed in free agency by the Commanders? Just depends on how much they're willing to spend, right? you could easily say 2. Sign 2, draft 1, and you feel good about that. Right? Now you got enough dudes to field the squad. And I could see that happening. I could see them signing a low-level edge rusher, signing a big-time free agent guy that they like. I think I've said this already. And if I haven't, I'm saying it now. The most money that I expect them to spend on a position, meaning a player, is edge rusher. If you asked me, what's the one position that you expect them to spend the most free agent dollars on, I would tell you that it'd be the edge rushing position. I think they're going to spend more lavishly at edge rusher because it costs, right? Edge rushers cost, but not only that, I don't see them dumping a ton of resources into other very costly positions. That's the one that we need the most, that's going to cost you the most, but also has enough guys out there that allows you to be in a position to spend a little bit. Like, there's no tackles. If there were tackles available that you had to spend big money on, Washington would probably be aggressive in that way. But there just isn't. There's Tyron Smith. I think he wants to go to a winner again. Don't rule out Dan Quinn's effect. And you know, Tyron Smith may be wanting to be a part of wherever Dan Quinn is. But the likelihood is he would rather probably go somewhere where he's got a chance to win. He hasn't won a Super Bowl. I would assume that the last piece to a Hall of Fame career would be hoisting a Lombardi. Not going to have that happen in Washington. So he's the free agent prize of the tackle position, I believe, even though he's up there in age and hasn't played more than 13 games in probably, 4 or 5 years. He's always injured. When he's healthy, he's still effective. I think they're going to sign a tackle. I just think it's going to be a guy that's not going to command a ton of money from them, right? Whereas edge rusher, Bryce Huff is available. Jonathan Grenard is available. Dorrance Armstrong is available. These are names that I've brought up in the past. These are not new names. I've talked about these guys already. I think one of the three will be a target of the Commanders. And if you're paying any of those three guys, with Huff probably costing the most, Grenard coming in second, and then Dorrance Armstrong probably third on that list, you're still going to have to pay a nice amount of money, even if you're going after Dorrance Armstrong, right? So I think that's the position they're going to ultimately spend the most money on. Thus, I wouldn't be shocked to see them double up and sign a guy that's going to cost them $12, $13 million a year. Like, wouldn't shock me if Jonathan Grenard gets a 3-year, $42 million contract. And then they turn around and sign, some low-level edge rusher on a 2-year, $8.5 million deal. That wouldn't shock me. Or a 1-year, $6 million deal. That wouldn't shock me. And they signed 2 of them. They're signing 1 for sure. I wouldn't be shocked if they signed 2. And that includes some of their own guys. I wouldn't be shocked if they brought James Smith-Williams back. I wouldn't be shocked if they re-signed Casey Toohill. I wouldn't be shocked. I don't see it happening. Not Casey Toohill, at least. I still think James Smith-Williams is in the mix. So don't discount that. Dr. B, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, if you had your number one free agent, who would it be and why? The number one guy I would go after. So, and you talking about of all the free agents, even if they're tagged, or are you specifically talking about the ones that are actually available? The ones that haven't been tagged, aren't re-signed by the team that they're coming from, and are going to be free agents. Which are you referring to? Because obviously the answer is different if you're talking about the guys that are actually available versus the guys that were available prior to the franchise tag, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll just give you an answer for both so you don't have to answer that question. If everybody were available, Josh Allen would have been my number one target. Josh Allen would have been my number one target. Clearly, he's gone. So with the guys that are available, I would say, irregardless of need, like I'm not just specifically talking about Washington. With the guys that are available, if I were a championship team, I'd probably be trying to go after, a L'Jarius Sneed if I had that kind of a need, or Chris Jones, somebody that I know is a needle mover for sure. If you're a team like Buffalo, for instance, and it would have been great if you didn't have Von Miller and you could just cut him and save a bunch of money. I would have just, if I were them, I would have just moved on from Von Miller and I would have aggressively went after. I don't think they're in a position to do this, by the way. Their cap situation wouldn't allow it, but I would have gone after Danielle Hunter. If I'm Buffalo, to hell with Von Miller, I'm going after Danielle Hunter. Guy that proved himself yet again last year when he's healthy, still very dominant in this league as an edge rusher. He's only 30 years old, which is younger than Von Miller, right? That's the kind of guy that if you're on the cusp of trying to win a Super Bowl, like if you're San Francisco, obviously you're in no position to do this because you already got Boza and, you tried to take the cheap route with Chase Young and, Randy Gregory, et cetera, but that's the kind of guy you need. Danielle Hunter is the type of guy that could put you over the top. So if I'm a team that thinks I'm close, Danielle Hunter is where I would go because he's a proven commodity in this league. When he's healthy, he's as dominant an edge rusher as we have in the league. That said, if you're just talking about the Commanders and their needs and what they're looking for and the guys that are available, I'm going Jonathan Grenard because that's the guy that's in the price range. I know he can stop the run and get after the quarterback, whereas Bryce Huff, known commodity to get after the quarterback, but the Jets didn't play him on first and second downs for a reason. He's not good against the run. That's a proven fact that he hasn't been able to stand up consistently against the run. So what that tells me is you're essentially going out and getting a gun for hire. You're hiring a specialist. I'm not paying a specialist every down edge rusher money. Somebody's going to do it, though. All it takes is one team to say, hey, Bryce Huff has one of the best win rates of any edge rusher in the league. I'm going to give it up. Frank McLaughlin, my guy, Frankie, baby. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Frank. Aloha, baby. Really appreciate you as always, man. Thank you for the support and the love, man. Can't thank you enough for your generosity. My guy, Frank, writes, Lou, aloha. Aloha, Frankie. Says, cheers to free agency. Cheers, my man. Keep up the great work, brother. P.S. You ever watch The Terminal List? No. That sounds like a Netflix show. What app is that on? What streaming app is The Terminal List? I'm gonna look it up right now. Save you the trouble of having to try to tell me where it is. I'm gonna look it up. The Terminal List. It's on Amazon. It's on Prime Video. Looks interesting. Looks to be right up our alley. I'd have to watch a preview, but it's checking a lot of boxes just on first glance. I'll just tell you that. I see a Navy SEAL returns home. People are dying. Sounds like a badass movie or a show rather to me. Question is, I saw 2022. Obviously, there was a writer's strike, so 2023 might have been out of the realm of possibility. But are they coming back for a season 2? I hate investing into shows only to be told, "Nah, we good. One season, we're out." And I told you, I said this at the top of the show. A lot of series are not being renewed, and it seems to be all the ones that I seem to love to watch. Me and my wife, rather, love to watch. So, is that one coming back for a season 2? Because I saw that it was 8 episodes, and that was in 2022. We're now in 2024. I can't wait for Wednesday. Did you guys watch Wednesday? I think we had a conversation about this already. Wednesday was one of the best series that I've watched probably in the last 5 to 7 years. Wednesday was so good. I know that they're working on season 2, but it's not going to be released, I think, until 2025, if I'm not mistaken. But they're filming it right now. I cannot wait for season 2 of Wednesday. Anyway, I digress. Thanks for the suggestion, Frank. I will check it out. I will do my due diligence and see if it is worthy of me and the wife popping the top on that thing. And I really appreciate the generosity, as always. John Perez, my guy, JP, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Eckler, Pollard, or Swift to Washington or Kansas City makes too much sense. Kingsbury and Reed would have fun with those two guys, getting them the ball in space. I know you've been pounding the table for Austin Eckler for at least 2 years now, and Eckler would make a ton of sense. Eckler doesn't have home run speed, and that I'm dying at this. I am dying as a fan of a team who has struggled with explosive plays. I'm dying for a running back that can hit a home run. I want a guy that if he does get it in space, he can go much faster than slow. And Eckler isn't that guy. Now, he's a reliable guy when he's healthy and he can catch it. We know that. And he might be able to do wonders. I think Austin Eckler, because the Chiefs don't need explosive catch and run ability. They just need guys that'll catch it. Eckler's a step up from Clyde Edwards-Helaire. I'm not sure that he's better than Jerick McKinnon. I know he's not a better pass protector than Jerick McKinnon. I can tell you that much. But he'd be a great fit. I think DeAndre Swift, though. If you hate the Chiefs and don't want to see them win, don't let them get DeAndre Swift. You don't want them anywhere near him. He'd be a problem in Kansas City. A massive problem in Kansas City. The only thing is, I think Swift wants to go somewhere where he'll have a chance to be the lead dog. And if he goes to Kansas City, they got Isaiah Pacheco. So I just don't see that mix being something that will be appealing to him, knowing that there are other opportunities with teams who don't have a lead back that would be starving for a guy of his caliber to have him be their lead, running back. So we'll see about all of that. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for your generosity. Really, truly do appreciate you, Chris. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Chris, writes, hey, Lou. What's up, Chris? Hope all is well with you and the fam. Likewise, as always, man, really, truly do appreciate you. And I hope you and your family are blessed. 2 questions. 1, with the Giants unlikely to be able to trade up for a quarterback, who do you think they will select and why? 2, what are your thoughts on the Prescott situation and whether they will offer an extension? So we'll take those in the order which you asked. So you talked about the Giants and unlikely to trade up to get a QB. What do you think they will do and essentially in the draft? So for me, with the Giants, they're in a really interesting spot. So for the Giants, they want a quarterback. They're not going to be able to get one of the top 3. That seems clear right now. Now, we can't say that with 100% certainty because we don't know what New England's going to do. New England could still go out and sign Baker Mayfield in free agency for all we know. at last glance, Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers conversation has started to heat up a bit now that Mike Evans is back in the fold. That might have given Baker a little bit of pause, not knowing if his number one target was going to be back in Tampa or not. And also with the Bucs, their first priority might have been, hey, let's get this thing with Mike settled, because no matter who's playing quarterback for us, Mike's always been a guy we could rely on. So let's get that done first, and then we can turn our attention to Baker. So now with that out of the way, I think Baker back to Tampa is starting to heat up, and it makes a ton of sense. So it seems that the most likely of scenarios is going to be quarterbacks go 1, 2, and 3 with the teams that are currently holding those 3 picks. Bears 1, Commanders 2, and the Patriots 3, right? If that is in fact the case, if you're the Giants, if you're desperate enough, you'll just pull the trigger on a quarterback and forget about what everybody else is saying. If you love J.J. McCarthy, if you love Michael Penix Jr., if you love Bo Nix, you don't have to wait. You don't care what everybody's saying about value, this, that, and the third. They didn't care when they took Daniel Jones at 5 or 6 back in 2019. They didn't care then. Everybody said they overdrafted him. They didn't care. They thought they got their guy. And that's what's important. So if you're the Giants and you love one of these other quarterbacks, you take them. Period. End of discussion. If you don't love them enough to pull the trigger at where you currently sit, which is what, 5, right? Let's look at the draft order. Let's look at where the Giants 2024 NFL draft order. See where the Giants currently sit. Giants are currently 6th, okay? So if you're the Giants, you sit there at 6 and you love one of these quarterbacks. 1, 2, and 3 are all quarterbacks. 4 more likely than not, if it holds quarterback. 4 is more likely than not going to be Marvin Harrison Jr. to the Cardinals. 5 to the Chargers, hot spot. If you're interested in a quarterback and you think you need to get in front of the Giants, Chargers could trade out of that pick, allow somebody to get in front of the Giants, or they could just trade with the Giants, right? Tell the Giants, look, I got 3 teams on the horn with me right now that's trying to get in front of you because they know you want a quarterback. Do you want this pick or not? I really don't want to move back that far, but I will. So what you trying to do, right? It's the same scenario that I posed with Washington and the Bears, where I said that pick holds a ton of value and Washington would have to give up more than the normal transition from 2 to 1 because of how hot that pick would be and how many suitors for that pick would be in line. So same thing with that number 5 overall pick. If the Falcons, if the Raiders, if the Vikings are all sitting there, Kirk Cousins signs back with Minnesota. Let's move Minnesota out of the mix. The Raiders still need a quarterback. The Broncos still need a quarterback. The Falcons still need a quarterback. They could all sit where they are, or they could all get aggressive. So then the question becomes, what do the Chargers do? Let's just say the Chargers don't move. They take a tackle or they take a tight end or whatever, right? Let's just say they do that. Now the Giants have the pick of the litter of the next 3 quarterbacks. They could take one. They could, again, take best player available, which could be a receiver or a tackle. They could use either of the 2. Like they could say, you know what, Evan Neal turned out to be a bust for us outside. Maybe we kick him inside and we can still salvage him. Take a tackle, and now whomever you're putting behind center, you're giving them the best opportunity to succeed, right? Whether it's Daniel Jones or a guy you draft in the 2nd round, right? So it all just depends on how they feel about those quarterbacks. If they don't love one, then they got to hope Michael Penix Jr. is available in the 2nd round, and then you do everything in your power to then get him in the 2nd round if you feel like that's good value and you like him as a quarterback, right? So my guess right now is that the Giants take a quarterback at 6. That's my guess. We've heard them talk about quarterback. They've done their due diligence. They know Daniel Jones is not the answer. They can sit here and try to lie to us and tell us, hey, we believe in Daniel Jones. That's what you're supposed to say. He's got one more year on that contract before they can start to make moves and get out of it. The exit ramp shows up next year. My guess is you get that young quarterback now and you let him compete with Daniel Jones this offseason. If Jones wins it flat out, okay, fine. If not, you move on. And that, I think that whole Daniel Jones component allows them the flexibility to be able to say, hey, we don't love any of these dudes here at 6. The value just isn't hitting for us. And they could mess around and say, you know what, we'll take a Spencer Rattler in the 2nd or 3rd round. We'll take a Spencer Rattler. And guess what? Spencer Rattler doesn't have to play year 1 if Daniel Jones is healthy. He sits, he learns, he grows, and then they can, throw him out there week 9, week 10, week 12, week 14, if it's a lost season, if Daniel Jones is struggling, if he gets injured again, or they just feel like he's ready and they know he's the future and Jones isn't. And you could go about it that way, right? So they got options. And my thing is, this is what you're weighing if you're the Giants. Loving one of these quarterbacks versus passing up on a guy that could be a generational talent. And I don't want to, generational isn't the right word. Passing up on a guy that could be a potential Pro Bowl, All-Pro type player for the next 10 years. Do you want to pass up on a Rome Odunze, or do you want to pass up on a Malik Neighbors, or do you want to pass up on one of these players that could be a game changer versus getting the quarterback? That quarterback still needs somebody to throw the football to. Giants fans will tell you we still need to protect the quarterback. There are going to be options available for them at 6 at both positions, receiver and tackle. You could take the first tackle in the draft if the Chargers don't. You could take the second tackle, who might be the first tackle on your board at 6. You could take the second receiver in the draft, because the only receiver coming off the board before 6 is Marvin Harrison Jr., more likely than not to the Cardinals at 4. So you could take the second, what you perceive to be the second best receiver in this draft class. You don't have a number 1 receiver on your roster right now. Nobody even remotely close to a number 1 receiver on your roster right now. So they can go in a number of directions. The key here is going to be, how do they feel about the quarterbacks? If they love one of them enough, you take quarterback at 6 and you don't think twice about it. If you don't, then you take the receiver and you keep it pushing. That would be what I would do. Take the receiver and then you go about your business. And there's always the possibility of the trade back. Who's at 7? Let me see. Who's at 7? The Titans are at 7, so it'll be hard for me to trade up to 6. I don't need to get in front of the Titans for anything, right? You would need, like, 7 would be a hot spot to get in front of Atlanta, because you think they might take a quarterback if they don't get anybody in free agency. But 6 isn't a real hot spot. I don't see the Giants having a ton of opportunities to trade out of the pick. But we'll see. So that's what I think about the Giants. Now, you asked me about Dak Prescott. We talked about this on, I want to say it was on the last podcast episode. Somebody asked me about Dak, and I want to say it was my guy, John. John asked me, did I think it was a real, real game of chicken that they were playing? John Cedillo. And I told him I do think that Dak is using the leverage that he has, because he has leverage. And he's really, like he did the last time, he's got the Cowboys by the balls. And he really, truly does. But what's there this time that wasn't there the last time is the ace in the hole, which is Trey Lance. They didn't have another guy that they could say, hey, we actually got a young guy on the roster that we wouldn't mind taking a look at. And you know what's going to ultimately help that situation for Dallas? And here's the tough part is they won't know. The only way they'll find out anything about Trey Lance is if he plays. That's the preseason, right? Dak wants a deal now, though. Like, you don't have time to wait until see what Trey Lance can or can't do in the preseason and then say, this guy stinks. Let's get Dak this deal done, right? They can't franchise tag Dak again. They've already done it. So you're playing a dangerous game of roulette here if you're Dallas. They know what they're doing because I think they're in a position where they want him to show them he's capable of winning big. If he can't do that, I think they're willing to move on and try something else, because the definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And for them, they're getting to a point now where, yeah, we know about the regular season. We know about your ability to win in the months September through December, but you haven't proven to us that you can get it done in January. To hell with February. You haven't proven that you can get us out of January yet. And until that happens, and it's not like he's played well and they just come up short. He's been terrible. You could argue he's been the reason they've lost these games. He was awful against Green Bay. He was awful against San Francisco, and that was arguably their best shot at winning a Super Bowl, I think, over the last 5 years or so. They beat San Francisco, get to the NFC Championship game. They could have beaten Philadelphia. I don't know if they would have, but they had already beaten Philadelphia. Granted, Gardner Minshew was their quarterback and Jalen Hurts didn't play, but that's a family member. Anything could have happened. But they blew it, and Dak was the biggest reason why that didn't go well. So I think that we're seeing a game of chicken. Who's going to blink, right? Who's going to swerve? I think it's going to be Dallas. This is what Jerry's done over the year. He did it with Dak the first time, and then, of course, he caved. He did it with Zeke Elliott, and, of course, he caved. This is what he does, okay? He did it with Emmett. I'm going back a ways now, showing my age, but he did it with Emmitt Smith, and Emmett pulled his card. Emmett sat out the first 2 games of the season. Dallas started 0-2, including a loss against Washington in week 1 where, we sucked ass and that wasn't supposed to happen. And he made his point. He paid Emmett. He comes back. Dallas wins like every game, it felt like, after that, and won the Super Bowl again. So this is Jerry's move. This has always been his move, is to try to call your bluff. And if you're not mentally tough enough to stare him in the eyes and wait him out so that he blinks, he'll get you. I see this situation really coming down to, do we believe in Trey Lance? And there's really no way of knowing that unless he plays. So I think Dak's going to ultimately get the deal. That's what I think is going to happen. Vincent Coe, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate it. Once again, thank you for the generosity. Christopher McLaughlin, my guy Chris. Vincent Coe, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Lou, do you think Cam Curl is a fit for my team? Just wondering, do you think if Cam Curl is a fit for my team? I think Cam Curl is a good fit for any team, because he's a smart football player. He's versatile. Now, obviously, what are you asking him to do is going to play a huge part in whether he's a true fit or not. But if we're just having a surface level conversation, meaning We're just talking about a generic defense. You're not really worried about scheme. You're just talking about the type of player you're getting. He could fit anywhere. Now, if you were asking him to be a Jamal Adams blitzer, wreak havoc wreaker around the line of scrimmage, no, that's not who he is. Right? If you're asking him to be a Quandre Diggs, middle of the field, lurking safety that comes down and makes plays on the football, nope, that's not who he is. But if you're asking him to be a little bit of both, right? In coverage, down around the line of scrimmage, making tackles, underneath zone coverage, those are the types of things he excels at. And so, can he blitz? Sure, he can blitz. I've seen him blitz. He can be effective in doing that, but he's not a speed demon. He's not a guy that's going to be, a dominant blitzer. Just depends on what you're asking him to do. Now, I look at it like this. Your new head coach, Mike Macdonald, came from Baltimore. Geno Stone had like 57 picks this year. Now, right time, right place. He was just around the ball. Geno Stone is not a tremendous athlete. I remember him coming out of Iowa being solid and thinking, oh, okay, cool. I think the Ravens drafted him in the 5th or 6th round or whatever. And he's a free agent this year, speaking of which. And he just happened to be around the ball a ton. Cam Curl can do that. And he can be that kind of a player. You're always looking for smart, heady players, and Cam Curl fits that profile. So I'd tell you, yes, he fits in Seattle. Now, again, what are you asking him to do will be the question. But if we're talking about Mike Macdonald's defense, I think he can do it. I think he can play in that defense. He could be, I'll tell you what he could be. He could be, for them, what he used Hamilton as in Baltimore. Hamilton would guard guys one-on-one. He would be an underneath zone defender. He'd blitz every now and again. Cam Curl can do all of those things. He can be a Swiss Army knife. Now, is he going to be as effective as Hamilton? No. He's not 6'4". Hamilton's not a burner speed-wise. He's faster than Cam Curl, though. But Curl's just a smart, heady football player. So, yeah, he'd fit. He'd fit in your defense. The Big Bad Wolf Beatty. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, these rumors are getting outrageous. They're just saying anything nowadays. I try to warn you guys about what's to come. And I try to prepare y'all, but people love rumors. Rumors. Oh no. People love rumors. They've been singing about rumors since the 70s. People love rumors. They love gossip. So I just stay away from that stuff because I already know what it is. I try to steer clear of that. Spicy Kicks Hawaii. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, hey Lou, what's going on? Spicy Kicks Hawaii. What's your thoughts on Ertz signing? I've pretty much already given it to you. If you watched the video that I put out earlier today, I already told you how I felt. I don't have any problems with it. It's forced me to look at the big picture a little bit differently. And I said that in the video and I explained myself there. So if you really want to know how I feel, I'll point you in the direction of the video that I did earlier. I'll just say this. I got no issues with adding Zach Ertz to the roster. Zachary's going to be a fine addition to a room that could use some veteran, talent with them moving on from Logan Thomas. They could use a veteran in that room. We could use another veteran on the roster. We're a very young team. That said, I've made it abundantly clear. I don't want him precluding them from being aggressive, attacking that position, whether it be in free agency with another guy or in the draft. If we come up donuts in both free agency and the draft, and I don't anticipate them after this signing doing anything in free agency. The only other place I see us attacking tight end is in the draft. And if we go through the entire draft and it's not out of the realm of possibility after looking at all the needs that we have and how the draft could fall, I could see them just saying, nah, we good at tight end. We got Amani Rodgers coming back. He's athletically gifted. We got Cole Turner. That guy can move, and Adam Peters might have liked Cole Turner coming out of Nevada. And they might say, yeah, no, we good. We got some guys that can move and run. And we don't need to do anything else. They just need a veteran to show them how to win, how to be a difference maker at the tight end position. And maybe Ertz is that guy. I might have a problem with it if you're telling me he's TE1 this upcoming year. I might have an issue with it, but I don't really have an issue with adding a Zach Ertz. If he's healthy, he knows the system. He's a guy that's going to come in here and be able to mentor these young tight ends that we have already on the roster. I don't see any harm in it. And again, low cost, low risk, potentially high reward proposition for a guy who's played at a high level for many years in this league. It's not a needle mover for me. I don't have any issues with it. Again, I hope they're still looking to upgrade that position though. That's what I hope. But if they are looking to get away with not having to address tight end this year, this draft isn't like last year's draft where you're like, bro, please get one. It's a solid draft. If they decided to pass on the tight end position as a whole, I wouldn't be that upset. But I'd like them to try to do something. But there's not many guys that I'm like, oh my God, we got to have this dude. Not like last year where they were just tight ends oozing and dripping out of every round for the first like 4 rounds. We like, bro, just grab one. Anyone, just grab one. They was like, nah, we good. I'm fine with the signing. Duncan Wright, been a member for 2 months. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, when's draft day? I miss talking trash to you, Lou. Draft day is April the 25th is day 1, I believe. And it extends all the way through the 27th, I think. Thursday is the 25th. Friday's the 26th. And then that's rounds 2 and 3. And then Saturday is the rest of the draft, 27th. So I think it's April 25th through the 27th. That's my guess. I could be wrong. Let me check my calendar right now, and I can tell you what it is. Yeah. 25th through the 27th. That's the draft. All right, we'll take a couple comments. Not a whole bunch of them. And we'll move on. I'm trying to get to as many of them as I can. Ghost Rider says, I still think they'll draft a tight end in the end. I'm not 100% sure about that. We'll see. I'm 50-50 on what they're going to do moving forward at the tight end position in particular, because you still got Bates, you still got Cole Turner, and you got Amani Rodgers, and that could be enough for them. That could be enough. So we'll see. What I want is competition. And so I don't want to settle. If there's talent out there that can be had, go get it. Bring them all to camp and let them compete. And I don't know if they are going to bring 4 guys, have 4 guys make the roster or 3 at the tight end position. Maybe what they ultimately do at quarterback might influence a position like tight end where they have to cut bait somewhere and trim off some fat. But if they want to go with 4, bring in a 5th guy, let them compete for 4 spots. You only going 3. You got 4 guys now. Let those 4 guys compete. Obviously, you're going to still bring a guy in or 2, whether it's undrafted, whatever. But we'll see. Ghost Rider writes, Ron Rivera is an ESPN analyst now. Well, didn't you know he was going to go on someone's network? Like, he'd already been setting himself up for this. Every year when the Super Bowl would happen, Ronald Rivera would do the press run where he would hit NFL Network, ESPN, Fox, wherever, right? You'd see him everywhere. So he's been setting himself up for this. I wish him nothing but the best. I wasn't impressed with the clips that I've seen of him, but he's got to get comfortable. You know, some people are natural. Some people have to settle into that role. He seems like he's going to have to settle in. He seemed a little bit uptight today. So we'll see. Coach T. Brown writes, for edge, I could see Washington picking up Huff 9.2 per year for 4, Uche 8.3 per for 2, or Epineza 5.6 per for 2. I don't think Josh Uche is going to cost $8 million a year. Just hasn't produced at a high enough clip. And the Patriots saw fit to just not play him this past year for whatever reason. So I don't see him commanded. But that's another guy. Like, I could see Washington signing a Josh Uche, right, to go along with a guy like Grenard, or I still think Dorrance Armstrong is more likely than anybody, right? Because Quinn's knowledge of him. I could see them signing Dorrance Armstrong and like a Josh Uche. I could see that. NES Tecmo writes, I say we complete this Philly combo after Kelsey, Ertz, and Swift. Great addition to our room and one less worry for the draft and only 25. I've suggested Swift. I've also heard somebody say that he doesn't want to play for Washington, hates Washington. You don't know who to believe. I can tell you this, whether it's true or not, normally dudes are pretty good at putting their biases aside because it's about getting that bread and getting to the bag. And if Washington's offering you a bag and an opportunity, you take it. But he's going to have opportunities around the league. And if he doesn't think highly of Washington and doesn't want to play for this organization, and it's been a trash-ass organization probably ever since he could remember, and he grew up an Eagles fan. Remember, he grew up in Pennsylvania. He grew up a massive Eagles fan. So he probably does hate the NFC East teams. And if that is in fact true, he may not want to play for any of them. And if he has options, then he'll try to stay away from those teams. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But I've already advocated for him coming to Washington. And for all the reasons that you mentioned, you know, young, talented, you're hurting Philadelphia, even though they don't seem to want him back. And you're helping your roster at the same time. It all makes sense. But I don't know if he'll be someone that ultimately ends up in Washington. Coach T. Brown writes, I really hope they get Cashman for three years for 8.7 per and Alshire for 3 years, 5.7 per. I just feel like Cashman is going back to the Texans. I just think that's what's going to ultimately happen. But you never know, right? Obviously, they haven't gotten anything done with him yet. They still have time before the start of the new league year to get a deal done with him so that he doesn't test free agency. Once he tests free agency, all bets are off. He had a breakout year last year, and he'll be in the mix. You know, throw him in the mix with all the rest of these linebackers. That I think that's another interesting group of this year in free agency. I don't think it's as deep as last year's group was, but I think it's an interesting group nonetheless. Patrick Queen is a part of that group. Devin White, Jerome Baker's just been added to that list. There's so many guys. You mentioned Aziz Alshire. You mentioned Cashman. There's so many guys. The linebacker from the Chiefs. There's a bunch of guys. Linebackers are another one of those positions that's pretty deep this year, and you can find you a really solid player, I think. Let's see. Coach T. Brown writes, the guards I like are Awinu. Awinu is right now, a tackle. And if I'm Mike Owenu, I want to be paid like a tackle. And he played right tackle last year. He played a ton of guard, finally got back out to tackle, played well. And I think if I'm him, that's what I'm telling teams I want to do. I want to play tackle. So you say 13.6 for 4 years for him. Jonah Williams, 10.8 per for 4 years, and Mekhi Becton, 12.9 for 3. I don't see Becton getting 36 million, almost $39 million per year, or $39 million over 3 years. I don't see him. He hasn't done anything to command that kind of a deal. So if I'm Mekhi Becton, I don't even think I'm signing a multi-year deal, honestly. And I don't think anybody should be interested in signing him to a multi-year deal. He's in 1 year prove it deal territory. Stay healthy, 1. 2, prove that you can get it done at a high level. And 3, prove that you deserve to be paid big money. I think he's in 1 year deal territory, is Mekhi Becton. But Jonah Williams, I don't think that's bad money for, him. I think it's a little rich though. But I'm trying to think about some guards that have been paid here recently and what kind of money they've seen. That's probably good money for Jonah Williams. $10 million a year, roughly. You pretty much got him at 11. I think that's a little bit much. But yeah, it's somewhere in there, I would guess. That's probably not too far off. Let's see. Coach T. Brown says Calvin Ridley is the only player I would spend big on in free agency at receiver. I wouldn't even touch him with a 10-foot pole. I'm not interested in any of the receivers in free agency this year. John Wynn writes, Quandre Diggs just got released. I'm so disappointed. Also writes, I didn't know there were going to be some changes in Seattle's defense now. You had to know this, John, that there was no more Pete Carroll. So that roster was going to turn over just a bit because not everybody's going to be a fit in this new scheme run by Mike McDonald and Aiden Durde. So you had to know that they were going to move on from some of these guys because in their scheme, they may not need a high-priced safety. They may not need some of these guys that, they could replace with parts that are a lot less expensive, but capable of getting the job done. So you had to know once new guys came in, even though your GM is still John Schneider, you had to know that really Pete was running a lot of what was going on there. Now that he's not there, Schneider can really spread his wings and kind of run this thing the way he wants to. So John Wynn also writes, Russell Wilson finally got released. So technically he hasn't been released yet, but he's been informed that he will be released at the start of the new league year. So they've given him permission to start seeking, employment, finding other teams that may be interested in him. John Wynn says, what's the new rule about kickoff unit? They just added new rules about NFL kickoff unit. Not yet. They're going to meet in the league meetings to discuss a bunch of rule changes potentially, and that's one of them, that they may adopt the XFL kickoff rules. And I talked about that in a past podcast, like maybe 2 episodes ago, maybe episode 400. I think I talked about it. So if you want a more detailed explanation of that, go check out episode 400, if I'm not mistaken. It's either 399, 400. It wasn't 401. John Wynn writes, Mike McDaniel was at the NFL Combine earlier this year. What was he trying to study? He's a coach. Players. That's what he was studying. Not all coaches go to the Combine, but a lot of them like to see these prospects in person. Meet some of them, talk to them, kind of get to know them to see if they're a good fit for your culture and what you're trying to build. Coach T. Brown writes, you still think Noah Fant will get picked up? Not by the Commanders. I don't. He's going to get signed somewhere. Absolutely. But not by Washington, I don't think. I could be wrong. I don't see it happening. Steel City writes, Lou, do you think Joe Alt is overrated? I've heard Connor Rogers of NBC Sports say it was the best tape he's watched since Penei Sewell, but you have him below Fuaga. I don't think he's overrated as much as I think that there are, look, he's got everything you're looking for, and he's young. So there's only even more room for growth. I have a preference. Alt, his tape for the most part is clean. I think there are some things that he can tidy up, but at that size, with that length, he's got functional mobility. He's got enough power to get the job done. He's a technician. You feel good about what he's already coming to the game with. And then if you can add a few tricks of the trade to a skill set that's already robust at such a young age, which means he's still moldable, there's a lot to like with Joe Alt. For me, Fuaga is more nasty. Like Alt isn't a nasty offensive lineman. And so Fuaga is nasty. His balance is pristine. He's a man mover in the run game, which Alt is not. So I think there are some things that I just prefer. That's what it all boils down to, is preference. Joe Alt is going to be a Pro Bowl, maybe even all-pro tackle. He's going to be good. So really good. So it's not a knock on Alt as much as it is, I just like Fuaga that much. That's all. All right. Coach T. Brown writes, I can see Jerry trying to get Deion's son in the draft, LOL. Shador will be the prize of next year's draft. Let's see how this upcoming season goes. But he'll be the prize at the quarterback position, I believe. I don't think there's a lot of quarterback, which is why I think, a lot of teams are going to be aggressive in trying to get their quarterbacks this year, because the draft just isn't as robust at the quarterback position next year. And it sounds good for Jerry to try to go up, but guess what? If the team who has the number one overall pick needs a quarterback and Shador is the guy that is the number one prospect, you're not getting Shador Sanders. Period. Right? That's how that works. So you can't, only way you can determine how that works is if either you suck and get the pick yourself, or you've made a trade with a team that ultimately sucks, like the Bears just did with Carolina, and they get the pick for you. But you don't hold any cards. The Cowboys have won 12 games 3 years in a row. They don't hold any cards. But again, that was with Dan Quinn as their defensive coordinator. He's no longer there. We'll see if they're able to keep it up or not. So we'll see. John Wynn writes, I need the new Seattle defense who is good with college talent. Obviously, when you get a new coach coming in, new defensive coordinator, they're going to try to build that defense in their image. There were a lot of pieces already there that fit the last defensive scheme. So now you got to figure out, do these pieces, are they universal pieces? Can they fit my scheme as well? That's what they're in the process of doing. That's a natural progression, right? So we'll see. We'll see. Ghost Rider writes, you think Drake May could be the Josh Allen of the NFC? That's hard to say. I was super high on Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming. I don't feel the same way about Drake May that I did Josh Allen. Josh Allen was different. I don't see that in Drake May. I see talent. I see ability in Drake May, and I see upside, but I don't see Josh Allen. I see more Herbert than Allen, but I don't see Allen. Allen's different. Jackson McMillan Orr writes, how much would you be willing to spend on Curl? I'd have to take a look at what the going rate for the safeties have been. I'm not paying him like the Steelers paid Minkah Fitzpatrick. I'm not paying him like the Falcons just paid Jesse Bates III. I'm not paying him like the Broncos paid I'm blanking on his name, but I'm not paying him like these top safeties who have been paid, who take the ball away. I would have to look and see where he fits. Find me a comparable guy who's put up similar numbers, and what he got. That's what they do in those meetings. That's what they do in those negotiations. I'd probably be willing to go as high as maybe 12. 12 million a year, maybe, would be the most I'd be willing to spend. He's just not a playmaker. And I can't spend big money on a dude who's not taking it away. Ghost Rider writes, I know it sounds crazy, but when I first watched Drake May's highlights, he reminded me of Aaron Rodgers, the way he ran and threw the ball. Nah, I didn't see that either. Aaron Rodgers is one of a kind when it comes to that. I don't think I've ever seen anybody on the run throw the ball with as much velocity and accuracy. Maybe Vic was the only other guy that I saw with that kind of whip on the football that could zing it into a tight space on the move. I haven't seen Drake May do that. I don't see that. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to our final segment of the show. And that is garbage time. So I'm fascinated with how the quarterback situation is going to shake out. If I'm a team looking for, like the Steelers, for instance, if they're truly not interested in any of the free agent quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield, and I don't blame them, by the way, if they're not interested, what are they going to do is the question. It's hard for me to envision them winning anything of note with the two quarterbacks that they currently have. So they got to do something. Russell Wilson is as intriguing of a situation as I can remember, because he could take next to nothing. Like literally, there's almost no reason not to kick the tires on Russell Wilson if you're a team that needs a quarterback, because you could essentially bring him in and set it up to where you could just cut him if you weren't satisfied with what you got out of him in camp and in the preseason. Russell Wilson is in a position where he could take $1 million to be your starting quarterback. That's enticing. And I talked about this briefly on the podcast last episode. That's enticing to any NFL team that could use a starting quarterback. That you can sign a guy. Like, what's the biggest reason that teams have to start cutting bait, getting rid of quality football players, not able to re-sign some of the guys that they want to? What's the biggest reason? Because you're paying a quarterback. If you can get Russell Wilson to play competent football at a very, very low rate. What? Now, having seen what we saw the last 2 years, 2 different coordinators, I may add, and it's not like the Broncos don't have talent, because they do. My guy Derrick B sent me a message where I guess he was watching like NFL Live or something. Somebody was talking about it, and they put up a graphic that showed the last 3 years Russell Wilson's been on a roster and how much he's made. And he pretty much said the last 2 teams he's been on have essentially paid over like $60 million for him to leave. The Seahawks traded him to the Denver Broncos. I think he had like $25 million left there. And then obviously the Broncos are incurring the biggest dead cap hit in NFL history to get rid of him. They want him gone that bad. And I can't imagine, how bad it was. But you got to be pretty pissed off at somebody to take that kind of a cap hit to move on from him. Where he goes is going to be really fascinating. And what's going to make it tough on a guy like Russell Wilson, I believe, is just the sheer amount of quarterbacks available. If this were a dead quarterback draft class, Russell Wilson would be in high demand. But because we're talking about 6 quarterbacks potentially going in the first round, that could allow teams to kind of sit and wait on Russell Wilson. I saw the Giants thrown out as a name, and I'm like, I don't think that's a fit. I don't think that makes sense for the Giants. It does from a financial standpoint. They're already paying Daniel Jones a boatload of money. Russell Wilson's not going to cost you anything. Russ could come in and give you another option as a starter, but that doesn't make any sense, right? It makes 0 sense. If you're the Giants, you would much rather get yourself a young quarterback. Now, what would make sense is, and this is why I'm wondering if Russ is even going to find a home until after the draft, right? Because you don't have to do anything if you're one of these teams out here that need a quarterback. You don't have to do anything until after the draft is done. Now, would that be a leverage play for Russell Wilson if you wait until after the draft and now you come calling? That lets him know you're desperate. Could he then try to up the price? Maybe. But I think he's more interested in finding somewhere to play ball than worrying about how much more money I can amass. I've already got a ton of money coming my way. I'm not really tripping about that. If you're Atlanta, if you're New York Giants, I'm talking about, if you're the Vikings, if you're the Raiders, hell, even the Steelers, even though they've said they're not interested, and you don't come away with anybody in the draft, Russell Wilson then becomes interesting, to say the least. Prior to the draft, however, because there are potentially 6 guys that could go in the first round. And then there's still a Spencer Rattler sitting out there who's a wild card as a 7th quarterback that, you would feel comfortable taking in the second or, even the 3rd round. After Spencer Rattler, I'm not really too concerned with any of the other quarterbacks. There's some guys that, could be interesting. The Kentucky quarterback that was formerly of NC State, Leary, could be interesting. We've talked about the Tulane quarterback, Michael Pratt, but I don't think any of those guys are needle movers. After Rattler, I think it kind of falls off of a cliff, so to speak. And even Rattler's a crapshoot. Russell Wilson and where he lands is going to be interesting. I don't see anybody. I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I can't see Russell Wilson being a hot commodity right now. I just don't see him being a hot commodity right now. And Russ strikes me as one of those dudes that's looking for assurances, reassurances. Hey, if I sign here, am I the starter? Are you going to go look for a quarterback in the draft? He strikes me as a guy that wants to know that I'm going to get an opportunity to be the guy and unquestioned as the guy. I can't commit that to you. If I'm the Raiders, if I'm the Vikings, if I'm the Falcons, if I'm, the Giants, and I don't even really think they're really involved in all of this, but if I'm one of these teams that could be potentially looking for a signal caller, I don't think I can guarantee you that I might not take a quarterback in this draft class. And with that said, do you just wait to see what happens? I'm just saying, I would not be shocked if we go through free agency, we see all kinds of moves made, we see Kirk Cousins land somewhere, we see Baker Mayfield land somewhere. The likelihood is both of those quarterbacks go back to where they came. But, I wouldn't be shocked to see a trade or two even commence and Russell Wilson still not be on an NFL roster prior to the draft. And you know what? That would probably make the most sense. All it takes is one team, however, at the price. And again, that price is hard to turn down because Russell Wilson is in a position that he can make it easy on whatever team wants to give him a shot from a financial standpoint. And that is the wild card. That's the ace he has in his back pocket. But if I'm the Raiders, if I'm the Vikings, the Steelers, the Falcons, the Giants, any of these teams that right now need a quarterback, I'm not checking for Russ right now. Not when there are potentially 7 quarterbacks, 6 in particular, and a 7th if I'm desperate, that are going to be available in this draft. And really, the teams that I just mentioned, you can take 3 of those quarterbacks out of the mix. So there are 3 other quarterbacks. Again, this is a game of quarterback musical chairs. Somebody's going to be left without a quarterback. And again, I'm not even adding Denver into this mix because they definitely don't want Russell Wilson. They've proven that already. But you can add them into that mix of Atlanta, Minnesota, Pittsburgh. They're in that mix. Vegas. That's 4 teams for 3 quarterbacks. And then you add Denver in. That's 5 teams for 3 quarterbacks. Somebody's going to be left without a quarterback. Now, if Minnesota gets Kirk Cousins, they're off the list. If the Falcons trade for Justin Fields, they're off the list. You see how that could work real quick, and all of a sudden, now the math is mathing. And now we went from 5 teams for 3 quarterbacks to the Vikings are out, the Falcons are out, and now it's just the Giants, the Broncos, the Raiders, and the Steelers. And so you're talking about 3 quarterbacks, 4 teams, but then there's a 4th quarterback sitting out there as a wild card in Spencer Rattler, and you could essentially have 4 for 4. And now I don't need Russell Wilson. Again, the likelihood is somebody's going to be left without a chair and a QB, and that's the team that might end up with Russell Wilson. But I find it interesting. I know what the Steelers said. Unless they're getting a new quarterback, I can't imagine Tomlin's cool with rolling with what he's got. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Will he hit the trade market? Maybe, but you can't convince me that I'm good with Mason Rudolph and Kenny Pickett. As a Steelers fan, that wouldn't sit well with me. You can't convince me that I'm supposed to be okay with that. Now, Russell Wilson's a hard sell too. At this point right now. He's a hard sell. But he seems like a better option than the 2 that are already on the roster. That's for damn sure. Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Louie T Network podcast. I thank you guys for joining me. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys the next time, which will be Friday. Hopefully, we'll be back for another episode. If not, then it'll be Monday. If you're a Commanders fan, we got a massive episode tomorrow. Free agency frenzy episode. Really, it is our last hard, long look at free agency as we prepare for the hell to all break loose next week. This is essentially the calm before the storm, because over the weekend, even though the tampering period isn't supposed to technically start until Monday, I think you're going to start hearing some shit over the weekend. So anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. I thank you guys for joining me. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys the next time. If anything crazy happens, like a Justin Fields trade, I'm back. But barring something cataclysmic like that, I'll probably see you guys either on Friday or Monday as we really start to turn the page and get ready for the start of free agency. So you guys have a good one. Take care. God bless. Good night.